We'll come back to that in a moment. Good morning, New England. Good morning, worldwide. Hey, Alexa. Hey, Google. Play the Pulse of an H. We're streaming on YouTube as well at the Pulse of an H. Everything with us is the Pulse of an H. And our poll question on X at the Pulse of an H this morning. Do you think U.S. Senate nominee and candidate in Maine, Graham Plattner, will suspend or drop out of the race this week? Yes or no? And we're going to have some guests coming up that have intel on that. And J-Dog, our results from yesterday, we now know the U.S. lost to Belgium. They didn't seem like they were really ever into that game. Take it away, J-Dog.
Will Team USA win tonight's men's FIFA World Cup match against Belgium? 70% saying yes, 30% saying no.
Of course, that was before the game. All right, we have cloudy, rainy weather today, and we'll 70 for a high. We also, coming up in this hour, this is pretty cool, live from Turkey in that NATO summit. Our own White House correspondent, John Decker, live at 9:35. All right, we're going to start on the Graham Plattner story out of Maine. If you missed it yesterday, I guess the wheels came off. The wheels came off the Plattner bus or train with basically allegations from a former girlfriend of rape. And it was interesting. Brad Carter, one of our political analysts and All-Stars, co-host of Contact Politics. Brad, good morning. It's just interesting how almost coordinated it was with Democrats, including here in New Hampshire and in Maine and nationally, calling for Plattner to suspend and, to drop out of the race in Maine. It was almost like, I'm not saying this was coming, but the allegations were there before, but this time around, it looks like this might be the end of this campaign. What does that mean, and what are your thoughts?
Hey, Jack. We talked about this a lot. We've talked about it on your show and on Contact Politics. Look at the bad thing for Republicans. This came a little bit too early. It would have been better for Republicans if it came,
right,
3 weeks from now, 2.5 weeks from now. Now they have time to get another Democrat on the ballot. Graham Plattner is dead man walking. I think he was dead man walking before. The allegations of abuse with multiple women was there. It was being chased down and documented by a bunch of people, including the Maine Wire folks. And we had one of the Maine Wire folks on our podcast. Talking about what's going on in Maine.
And we have Steve Robinson coming up after you. Yeah.
I think that the strongest candidate Democrats would be Congressman Golden. He's from the most Republican part of the state.
Mm-hmm.
He actually interned or worked for Susan Collins at one point in time. And he's been a 3-term, maybe even a 4-term congressman from that district.
Right.
And he's not seeking re-election. They have to do some soul searching. I mean, Democrats could see this coming, and they stuck by Graham Plattner, which was head scratching. They could have made this pivot almost a month ago now.
Right.
And they didn't. And the governor is clearly in a bad spot. I don't think she's going to be the nominee, even though she kept
Janet
her name
Mills
on the ballot through the primary. Janet Mills, yep.
Yeah.
And she won her elections overwhelmingly. Maine is a Democrat-leaning state. The largest voting bloc are uncommitted voters.
Mm-hmm.
It's about 38%, and then Democrats have about a 4% lead over Republicans on the partisan divide. And Donald Trump lost Maine by 9 points and 7 points. So Maine leans left.
Yeah, no, I talk about it. I talk about it on my show a lot. In fact, south of Augusta, or even if you go up to, really south of Augusta, it's far left. I mean, look at the legislature. But Brad, I guess the question is, I think Maine has something because he won that primary. He's the nominee, Plattner. I think they have up until July 27th to basically kind of name someone to run.
I think it's the third Monday, technically, of the. I'd have to look at the calendar. I believe that their rules are the third Monday of July, and then they have they can convene a selection process. I think through their state convention. So it looks like what's going to happen. And my guess is they will all try to come together and find a candidate to replace Plattner. He's taking a break right now to assess things. And the only thing you need to assess is, he's sitting on the tip of the Titanic as it's going underwater.
And of course, the difference here is, and we've even seen it in New Hampshire, where finally Chris Pappas and Stephanie Shaheen and others are calling for him to step out. Is his own party?
Where were they before, though? Where were they before?
Oh, they were.
This train was coming.
Mum's the word, Brad. It's his own party now, nationally and in Maine and locally. I mean, he's done because his own party is now turned on him, Plattner.
Yeah, and it Chuck Schumer's looking smart because Chuck Schumer never really got behind Plattner, and he was with Janet Mills, and then Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren and Ed Markey and the whole left. Ro Khanna, they all embraced Plattner, and I'm wondering if Plattner might just suck it up and play the Donald Trump and just kind of double down. I mean, we've seen political scandals hit Donald Trump that you think would sink his any chance he could have to get elected, and he powered through it. And he played the victim card, and it worked for him. I'm not sure anybody has that kind of skill.
Well, I think the difference though, Brad,
Trump.
I don't think Plattner's Trump, and I think the difference is Trump has already, when a lot of these came, he was his own party. He'd taken over the Republican Party. Plattner is not. He's not the Democrat Party in Maine or nationally. He's himself, and I think it's when his own bosses eat him up and want him out. I don't think he survives this. In fact, we're hearing out of.
I think he is a little bit of his own party, though, Jack. I don't think he is the traditional Democrat.
No, he's not the traditional.
Traditional Democrat.
Well, we're hearing coming up next. You referenced Maine Wire. Steve Robinson is going to join us. They're already saying he's dropping out this week. I mean, they have some information. I don't know what's going to. I don't.
Oh, there's no question. He's got to get out. Reality is he's got to get out. But I'm just wondering.
But no, to your point, does he?
That fighter.
But does he? I mean, the funny thing is when this happens, they can't just say, I did it. I'm sorry. I'm a loser. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. He has to say, well, I'm going to reassess the best way to go forward. How this is being reported is false. So again, denial. But this is significant enough, obviously, with the woman coming forward in person by name, which takes a lot of courage, saying I'm not interested in money. I just want people to know the whole picture here. And
what also happens, Jack, is that situations like this, a lot of times in Congress, you've seen members of Congress be embroiled in allegations of criminal misconduct, and they stay in office in part because it gives them some leverage to work out a deal. And so will he try to stay in the election because his legal team would think it would be the right thing to do? And I don't know the statute of limitations wherein all these happened, or if there is potential criminal liability, but that's what they might talk about that. We feel you'd be in a better position if you stayed in this high profile and continued to make public.
To your point,
denial.
I mean, he is the nominee. He got almost 70% of the primary vote. Mills, the governor, even though she had suspended her campaign, she was on the ballot. She got just 19%. So you're correct. He doesn't have to drop out, but in a different way, in totally different circumstances. Neither did Joe Biden, and he did. I mean, at some point, it's just overwhelming, and I just think it's Donald Trump has faced overwhelming odds before, but he's Trump, and I just think. But let me ask you this before we go real quickly, Brad Card. Okay, so you're now Senator Collins. You're probably hoping that Plattner had been your challenger the whole way through. Is this good or bad news for Senator Collins if he drops out?
Well, I think any objective observer would say it's not good news for Susan Collins because they're going to get a fresh face and they'll have somebody, and then there'll be a little honeymoon period for that candidate, which is troubling. And Susan Collins has been running a pretty smart race, though. She's been sticking to she hasn't been playing the Graham Plattner game, really. She's been sticking to what she's brought back to the state as appropriations chairman and all the things that she's done for the state of Maine and how she's helped the businesses of Maine. So I think she's run a smart campaign, and in hindsight, it's even smarter than I thought it was. because she didn't just focus on Plattner.
Right. She wasn't jumping all over. All right, Brad, we have to run. Thank you, Brad Card, on a Tuesday. Brad Card, co-host of Contact Politics. Thanks, Brad. We come back. Steve Robinson, Maine Wire. They've been on this story like a blanket, and they pretty much have broken all the big stuff, and he's the executive editor of the Maine Wire, and he joins us live on Good Morning New Hampshire, the Pulse of an H, right after this.
It's more.
All right, welcome back. Welcome back. Busy day, national politics, all focused on the state of Maine. And I dare say that I don't think we'd know half of what we now know outside of Maine and inside of Maine if it wasn't for the Maine Wire and their exposés, and I think good open coverage of things that sure the Democrats south of Augusta and Maine don't want covered. Everything from Medicaid fraud to the Governor Mills administration, the guy named Graham Plattner. They've been all over this story from the beginning, and Steve Robinson is the editor of the Maine Wire. You're hearing more and more about that. Steve, thanks for joining us. Good morning, New Hampshire, the Pulse of an H.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Is Plattner out of the race this week?
Well, that's up to him. Under Maine law, he's the only person who can make that decision. And so far, we don't have any word. Everybody can look at the video where he looks like he's taking a couple of Xanax and says he's going to take some time to consider his next step forward. But he has to voluntarily submit his withdrawal to the Secretary of State by July 13th. There's no mechanism for the party to force him out. And if he does voluntarily withdraw, there's a little bit of ambiguity as to how the process would unfold to replace him. The Maine Democratic Party's charter points to state law points back to the charter. So the party leaders will kind of be making it up as they go along with an attempt to replace him. But I can tell you that party leaders here in Maine are anticipating him withdrawing because there's already talk going on about how that process will unfold, whether they'll try to do snap special elections, some kind of a caucus system. And there was a poll in the field yesterday and over the weekend, which I actually was a recipient of, where they were polling essentially every Democrat in the state of Maine for their favorability against Susan Collins, including Lewiston native Patrick Dempsey, the star of Grey's Anatomy, who I haven't been able to reach for comment to see whether he's interested in running against Susan Collins. But it's certainly an interesting time to be covering Maine politics.
Well, Steve Robinson, Maine Wire. What's different on this one, though, is the Democrats are jumping ship here in New Hampshire nationally and in Maine on Plattner. Before, these allegations aren't new, but now his former girlfriend in person by name, he did this to me. It's overwhelming. He's reflecting the best way to proceed forward. Still calling it false, by the way, because, you know, people that are like some people, I'm just going to say it like him, they're never responsible for anything. But Democrats are jumping the ship. Democrats. I mean, it wasn't that long ago, Steve Robinson, after the primary, when he got almost 70%, that Elizabeth Warren was in Maine. And she said, with Plattner behind her, her quote, "It's great. It's so great to be in Maine. And the U.S. Senate needs fighters, and we need fighters like Graham Plattner." And, you know, these same Democrats now are jumping the ship today. And by the way, it's pretty interesting, the timing, even in New Hampshire, with some of our federal office holders or candidates are now denouncing Plattner when they didn't say anything before. But it's all, he's being eaten by his own party is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and, you know, it's an interesting dynamic to see unfold, especially considering that the New York Times had this entire story from Jenny, the woman who spoke with Politico and CNN back in June. This woman was quoted in that story, but the details of the actual rape that she alleges were off the record, and the Times didn't report them. And the Times, in my opinion, really buried the lead of the story, which was sexually abusive behavior toward Lindsay Fifield, which was, she gave them mountains of documentation, which they failed to properly report. And I think that they misled her in their reporting on that topic. But that did not trigger this wave of Democratic retractions in the same way that the reporting, this new round of reporting has. But I don't know that that's going to be very influential for Plattner. We're talking about a guy who is third generation old money, you know, hasn't really had to worry about his economic future, is kind of pretending to be poor working class, but not really full disability. You know, I think he's a true believer in the communist movement, and that's what he'll be putting first and foremost is, you know, the revolution. And maybe he thinks that he still stands the best chance of recovering from this. I mean, the guy survived the Nazi tattoo scandal. The guy survived the New York Times scandal. How many scandals has this guy survived? Maybe he has the bravado and confidence to muscle through this.
But again, now that when prominent Democrats in your state and outside want you to drop out, even if he does the tears press conference next week and ask for everyone's forgiveness and apologize for everything he's done bad in his life, and he's going to forge forward for this greater cause, I don't see the same Democrats who've abandoned him now coming back. But, you know, Steve, I'm going to ask you a question. Steve Robinson, the Maine Wire, before we let you go. You've been all over this story, and I think your folks are doing a terrific job unraveling the blankets and the layers that people don't want uncovered in Maine. But, Steve, I have been around this track, as you have, for more than a little while. And I find as I age in place on this earth, I don't call it, I'm not getting pessimistic, but I get more cynical. And I don't believe in coincidences. And I didn't believe on the Sunday when I was fishing on that summer when a buddy of mine texted me on my boat saying, hey, Biden is dropping out when he wasn't going to drop out. I don't believe on that Sunday and that everything orchestrated for Harris to jump in, including her fundraising machine. I don't think Joe and Jill Biden woke up on that Sunday morning saying we want to drop out of this race. I think they put a political gun to Biden's head. So I don't believe in this stuff. And I'm looking at the Plattner story, and I think when the polls a week ago, the polls in Maine and nationally started to show after the primary, the honeymoon was over, and Mills was already moving into a healthy position in this race. All they care about is winning that Republican seat by calling. They don't care on anything else. I said the day of your primary, Plattner could go out and rob 2 banks in Portland, Maine, be arrested by 1:30, mugshot by 2 o'clock, and his supporters want to give a damn. So I believe when the polls started to show that this honeymoon was over and short-lived, that they basically said, we got to get rid of this guy on our own before the Republicans do. We need to get rid of him. He's a liability, and so we need to get this story out there. I may be wrong, but is that crazy?
Well, I don't think it's crazy to suspect that they tried to, that there were some political motivations within the Democratic Party to take him out. But I think that those motivations were there from the very beginning. He was never the candidate that Chuck Schumer and the establishment Democrats wanted.
But they endorsed him.
They did, but only after he was the nominee.
Right.
The original leak of the Reddit material, that came right from Chuck Schumer to CNN, and that was dropped a week before Janet Mills, who was the establishment pick, who was begged by Schumer to run for the nomination. That came a week before she ran. That wasn't a coincidence. That was planned. If there was a more coordinated effort to try to take out Plattner by Chuck Schumer, I think that it would have come a little earlier. I think more likely what happened was the same group of left-wing feminists who got together with the accusers of Eric Swalwell and put an end to his gubernatorial ambitions in California, read the New York Times story, got in touch with some of the women who were named there and said, hey, we'll provide you with legal support. And I also know that there were actually, there's some security precautions that have been taken for the women involved in telling their stories, paid for pro bono by these volunteers. So there's a kind of a non-political effort to help these women come forward. This is a woman let me hear me roar type situation more than it is a Chuck Schumer puppeteer situation.
But what's different on this one, and I'm looking at WABI, my first TV job was there in your state, and the Plattner stories, he calls the story false, but he's taking a pause to think about how to move forward. He calls it false. So how does he stand up in a day and age where all these Democrats believe the word of the accuser, which probably they should? How does he stand up when this woman's identified herself? She's there. She's credible. She says he did this to me when he was drunk and I told him no. And he's over here saying it's false. Does he survive this?
I would have said that he couldn't survive the Nazi tattoo or the original sexual abuse allegation story. If he wants to stay on the ticket, he can stay on the ticket, and there's no mechanism to force him off. That it's as simple as that. And we may be in, an era of American politics that is post-scandal. The Katz agency, the Morris Katz agency that's behind him, has said, voters like imperfect people because everybody's imperfect. And that's why they're Graham Plattner's resonating. Maybe people forget come November about this story.
Real quickly, 10 seconds. If he does drop out and they pull their little thing in the next few weeks, Democrat Party, who becomes their nominee?
I think the odds-on favorite at this point will be either former Senate President Troy Jackson, who just lost his race for governor, or Nirav Shah, the former Maine CDC head, who is also a gubernatorial candidate. All
right. Thank you, Steve Robinson. The Maine Wire. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks.
We come back. John Decker, our own White House correspondent. Where is he live this morning? How about Turkey and the NATO summit?
107.7 W. Good Morning New Hampshire, live from the New England College Studios. Now, back to Jack on the Pulse of New Hampshire.
You know, one of the streaming movies is a pretty good movie. I forget the name of it right now on Netflix, called about the whole opioid crisis. And coming up in the next hour, we're going to have the Deputy Attorney General in this state, Jim Buffetti, who has played a lead role in getting the opioid settlements. At 10 o'clock, we'll have that. This is pretty cool. Our own White House correspondent, John Decker, as I promoted this morning. He is live in Turkey. You never want to know where John's going to be at the NATO summit where President Trump, I believe, John Decker live. Good morning on our time. Is answering some questions and giving comments. Good morning, John.
Yeah, good morning. The president arrived here where I am in Ankara, Turkey, a few hours ago. He's already had a bilateral meeting with the host of this NATO summit, President Erdogan. The president answering a few questions during the course of that bilateral, still calling out some NATO countries for not helping out in terms of the U.S. war against Iran, and also not spending enough on military spending, as was agreed to at last year's NATO summit. There will be a working dinner tonight, and then day 2 of the NATO summit takes place tomorrow.
John, the president was, some of his comments this morning, John Decker live in Turkey, was pretty complimentary of the leader in Turkey in terms of how he's built up his military. And is that just President Trump sort of being nice to his host?
Well, it's not just being nice. It's very sincere. The president probably gets along the best with all of the leaders here at the NATO summit. There are 32 members of the NATO Defense Alliance, and he gets along best with the host, President Erdogan. So not paying just lip service. He really means it when he talks about his like of President Erdogan and how well they get along together. Interesting history, too, with Turkey going all the way back to the Cold War or the Cuban Missile Crisis. Hey, John, before I let you go, what's it like there? I mean, what's the mood, the atmosphere? Is it just all business where you are in high security, or what's it like? Well, it is. You know, there's so many road closures. You'd think that, 50% of the population is police, just with the amount of police that you see out in force. We have to go through several layers of security to get to our hotel, which is a NATO hotel, go through, several layers of magnetometers just to get inside of our hotel. So it is all business. But tomorrow, the president will conclude the NATO summit with a press conference. I'll be at that press conference, and hopefully, Jack, I get a question at that press conference tomorrow. Yeah, good. You can ask him, too, if he's going to sign the housing bill. No, thank you, John Decker, live in Turkey. All right. Michael Graham, New Hampshire Journal, nhjournal.com. I think with more on the New Hampshire political reaction of Democrats to the Graham-Plattner bombshell day or two here, and whether or not Plattner drops out. We just had Steve Robinson from the Maine Wire. It's up to Plattner. Good morning, Mr. Graham.
So that huge breeze that hit your house last night, Jack, was not part of the rainstorm moving through. It was every Democrat in New Hampshire breathing a sigh of relief that Graham Plattner is gone, because it was a real problem. Obviously, New Hampshire Journal has been asking Congressman Chris Pappas from the beginning if he was going to endorse Plattner and would he be comfortable working with him, because they'd be literally in the next desk from each other if they both went to the U.S. Senate as freshmen from New England. And his answer was always no comment, whatever Maine wants. Who am I to judge? My favorite was when I asked Pappas about Plattner saying that if someone broke into his house, he would, quote, rape them, but not in a gay way. And I thought for sure, since Chris Pappas is running to be the first openly gay man in the U.S. Senate, he might, have something to say about this anti-gay slur. Nope, nothing, whatever Maine wants. And suddenly last night, after it was clear that Plattner was toast, Representative Pappas released a single sentence saying that these allegations are reprehensible, not the other ones, the Nazi tattoos, shoving his girlfriend, that was all cool. But now he's crossed the line. Including Stephanie Shaheen. She's lambasted or saying Plattner's got to go. Look, but, all these allegations were there even before the Maine Senate primary. I mean, I guess it's because the woman is in person identifying herself, which takes courage. But the previous woman identified herself as she was a Republican. And Steve Robinson made a very good point in your show, Jack, that the New York Times had this story. So why do you think this came out this way now? And I asked Steve Robinson, and if anyone would know, it's him. He's not sure Plattner drops out. Oh, I disagree with Steve on that. But what do you think? I want to know what you think. Well, I mean, I think he drops out because you can't run without money. I mean, the fact is that's bottom line. You got to have some money, particularly a spoiled brat like a Plattner who's never worked a day in his life. He's not going to go out and shake the can for money. But you're right, Jack. It's about the calendar. Why did the New York Times sit on this story until now? Because the primary's over, but they've got plenty of time to replace him. It won't be Jared Golden because Golden has already said he doesn't want to go back to Congress, and he's already said he would. In the past, he said he would never run against Susan Collins, who he worked for. So they're going to have another, progressive, nationalized, socialized medicine, kind of left winger, and that's what they're going to do.
See, I said to Steve Robinson, and maybe you heard, I don't believe in coincidences as I get older. If hypothetically, if the main surveys and polls and national had showed Plattner with a 10 to 12 point lead over Collins like through Monday yesterday, and this story came out, do you think that I'll be bailing ship on him or not?
Jack, we all make mistakes. We all learn from. He's grown. He's not the same person. He's a person with a double-digit lead and a seat we need to flip. I think there are moral depths to Graham Plattner you have not discovered yet. That would be what we were hearing if he had a 10-point lead. Instead, the polls show that he's going in the wrong direction.
So they got to get rid of him. Inside job?
Oh, no, I agree with Steve Robinson. There's this national group of people, of women in particular, who really have been working since the Clinton era. I think what they're trying to do is make up for their embarrassment that they defended Bill Clinton back in the day. And they've been pushing at people like Swalwell back out in California. And, they obviously, Harvey Weinstein, et cetera, they've been pushing this really hard. And I think that was there. But if the poll numbers were where they needed to be, Democrats will find a way to slough it off. That's where we are. But it is very good news for Chris Pappas that he doesn't have to answer this question anymore. It's good news for Stephanie Shaheen that she doesn't have to answer this question anymore. So they are very, very happy. And whoever it is, I promise you this, Jack, the Democratic nominee for U.S. Senate in Maine will not have a Nazi tattoo. That's the only promise I can make in this crazy world. Meanwhile, your good friend Cindy Warmington, who I know you've endorsed for governor,
I don't endorse anyone.
New Hampshire Journal, after Jack Heath's endorsement of Cindy Warmington.
What are you trying to get me going?
Everyone knows about that.
Trying to get me going with analogy here?
I'm kidding. Listen. Let me take. So we obtained an audio recording of Cindy Warmington talking privately to a group of Democrats in Pelham. And they asked her about energy policy because obviously New Hampshire has crazy high, electricity prices, blah, blah, blah. Well, in 2024, she released a plan for net zero by 2040. You want to see your bills explode, go no natural gas, no oil, all wind and solar and whatever. It would just be a disaster. Well, she told them in this off-the-record meeting that she was bringing her 2024 plan back and that she's still tweaking it, but that's what's coming out. So as NH Journal readers know, because they go to nhjournal.com and sign up for our newsletter, that'll be a part of the Cindy Warmington proposal is, and by the way, to get to net zero, no gas-powered cars.
Yep.
Now, we don't know how she defines, some people define net zero as just your power system. You know what I mean? Like the grid has to be net zero. They don't mean individual stuff. We'll see. But so that's what Cindy Warmington's doing.
I have fun still with my high school buddies, a few of them where I grew up north of Boston, and the town I grew up in, the town council's now outlawed gas-powered weed whackers and lawn mowers and all this stuff.
Sure.
And I pointed out in a piece, and of course my friend posted it, and they laughed because they don't know how to respond. We have a nice harbor in the town I grew up in, and there's a lot of nice big boats there that have like 300-400 horsepower on the back, and they pull up to the fuel dock. And I'm like, okay, Marblehead, that's where it was. You're gonna ban those pesky gas-powered leaf blowers, but you got a guy pulling up with 300 horsepower filling up on the dock. You're going to ban him too? And they didn't respond. Anyway.
One of the things that frustrates me is that people who advocate for green energy, and let's be honest, Jack, no one listening to you cares how the electricity gets made. They don't care if it's, if it's solar and wind, great, whatever. They just want it to be reliable and
affordable.
Yeah, well, the reason why Cindy Warmington can say falsely that solar is cheapest is because you get so many subsidies. You got tax dollars and ratepayer dollars covering it. And this week, there's a story out of Texas where they have these Biden era, the Inflation Reduction Act. It was really a Green New Deal thing. Those numbers are going away. The price of a megawatt hour is going to jump from $55 to $121 for consumers. That's a 3-time increase in your bill because the subsidies are gone. So that's what green energy really costs. It costs the taxpayers billions so you can have fake lower bills.
Good stuff. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
We get back. Dean Spiliotis, Southern New Hampshire University, retired. Next.
This is the Pulse of New Hampshire, 107.7 WTPL.
And now, here's Frank and Cheryl to discuss the fundamentals of a mob ring. Did I get that right?
Frank, someone just came in and purchased an MOB ring.
Cheryl, what the heck are you talking about?
Yeah, I was confused too.
A mother of the bride ring.
Ah, okay. I get it. Carry on, used to.
I've never heard of it before, but I love it. A new trend to start. I guess it could be any piece of jewelry.
Apparently, you've lost your mind. First, a push present when you had our son, and now you're talking about an MOB present. It never ends.
I just thought it was cool. A mom gets something to wear for her daughter's wedding, a symbol of her daughter's big day.
Okay, then. Capital Craftsman and Romance Jewelers, now starting new trends. MOB, Mother of the Bride Jewelry. Don't kill me, guys. Blame
Good morning, New Hampshire, live from the New England College Studios, home to a new media center where the next generation of journalists are taught to do it right. Now back to Jack Heath on the Pulse of New Hampshire.
By the way, there's so many things happening. What is going on with these teen takeovers? Can anyone out there illuminate that? As many as 10,000 teens, they go online and they pick a place and they just show up, shooting up the place, breaking it. I think Raleigh, Durham was the last place. Some creek, some area there, they gathered over the 4th, like upwards of 10,000 teens. How would you like to be their parent? Oh, where's my kid? Where was he? Where was she arrested? What were they? I mean, kids are kids, teens are teens, any generation, but this is a little bit crazy. But my humble opinion, for what it's worth. All right. Know where your kids are. Yeah, they're going to go with 10,000 other kids and just tear up a town and store. You know, the sad thing is on the 4th, a lot of those business owners, that's where, restaurants, that's their livelihood. And these basically, in my opinion, punks show up and they basically have to close their business because of safety for their employees, because they just, these mobs of kids and they missed that business. So there you go. Kids today, I'll leave it at that. Dean Spiliotis, retired political scientist and science professor of political science at Southern New Hampshire University on this Tuesday morning. Dean, good morning.
Hi, good morning, Jack.
Well, we spent the balance of this hour not only going live to Turkey and the NATO summit with John Decker, our White House correspondent, live with the president and the other leaders, but we spent the balance of the hour talking about the Graham Plattner bombshell, but it really shouldn't be a bombshell. It's just the latest bombshell in the U.S. Senate race in Maine. And it's hard to tell if he's going to drop out. Some would say it's insurmountable to overcome this one. And even New Hampshire Democrats, including Chris Pappas, Stephanie Shaheen, are condemning Plattner, saying he should drop out now. They might have been quiet before, but the Democrats are bailing ship. And Maine has a funny system where I guess they technically could, if he submits his papers to the Secretary of State that he's dropping out, they could put someone in there to run against Collins. But I guess he has to drop out first. But your reaction, because this is not a small story just because of Maine, but nationally, given the balance of power in the Senate.
Yeah, no, this is a huge story for a variety of reasons. Certainly Democrats' desire to take back the Senate is at the top of the list. And, there had been increasing concern as more and more red flags had popped up with him as a candidate over time. And the polling between him and Susan Collins had continued to close until they were basically in a dead heat. So there's been concern for some time that he was facing some headwinds as a result of all of these accusations. I think thus far, up until this most recent rape allegation, Democrats were willing to kind of buy into the redemption story that, here's a guy who served his country, had PTSD, struggled with alcohol. And so he had a lot of bad things in his past, but he kind of turned it around, even though there were red flags like the texting with other women when he had just gotten married. That was only a couple of years ago, but this is obviously a much more serious and problematic allegation. And I just think it really was the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak. I don't see how he can stay in. He's not going to be able to raise any money. He's got his own party in Maine saying that he should drop out. And, some of the Democratic luminaries like Ro Khanna, Ruben Gallego, the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, Kirsten Gillibrand, Chuck Schumer, all saying he should drop out. I'm not sure if Bernie Sanders has weighed in yet. He's a big supporter of Plattner. He's been quiet. I think he's been quiet so far. I've been looking.
Yeah, I think he's having some mushroom tea with the novelist Stephen King in Bangor. King saying Plattner shouldn't drop out. I think he's with Mr. King. Yeah. Hey, Dean, let me play devil's advocate for a moment here, because this is fun. Because a couple of our guests earlier kind of poked on this lane. You being the political scientist, Plattner's got nothing to lose at this point. I mean, he's got nothing to lose, right? Like, in other words, he's the nominee. He has to drop out. And they could try the old Joe Biden on that Sunday, putting a political gun to his head. But, you can say he's not going to raise any money. I agree with you. He's not going to get the support of traditional Democrats. But these are not traditional times. And the people that voted in Maine and gave him almost 70% of a primary vote a few weeks back over sitting governor Democrat who's no moderate liberal, Janet Mills. They kind of like the guy. So could he do the old, other than the money thing, hey, I'm the victim here. This story's not entirely true. I've made mistakes. The cause of turning over fascism and taking on ICE and the Trump agenda is greater than the scandal. I am not giving up. And he kind of plays this fighter. He's got nothing to lose. What are the chances he pulls that one?
He could certainly try that. The problem for him is that the primary electorate is not the same as the general election electorate.
Right.
There are going to be a whole bunch of voters in there who are just not going to be willing to take the plunge, so to speak, and they'll likely
to be crazy.
Right? They just won't. Either they won't vote or they'll stay with Collins or what have you. So I think in the short term, he could do that, and there probably would be, as you mentioned, Stephen King. There probably would be some portion of the base of the party that would be behind him. But I think he would run into so much trouble in a general election. And the challenge for Maine Democrats is, right, as you mentioned, they can't really use Janet Mills because so much of what motivated the base was a sort of generational change, a more progressive populist message than Mills was able to deliver. I mean, she's in her mid or late 70s at this point. And so they got to find somebody who excites those people, because if they stay home, then Democrats are going to lose anyway.
But you know, it's funny, Dean, what they were talking about this. Dean Spiliotis, regular political analyst and All-Stars. I don't know Plattner at all. I don't know him at all. Only what I've read and seen, like you. I don't know him.
Yep.
I have a cousin who's a doctor in Maine who knows of him, and is, you know, when he was younger, and doesn't speak terribly highly of him, but I don't know him personally. But if you're in his shoes in this crazy day and age of politics, and you won the Senate primary for the U.S. Senate by that much, and I agree with you. That was a primary, not a general election. And I agree with you that Collins now is probably hoping Plattner stays in the race. But if you're him and you're young and you walk away now, the last story people remember about you is this serious rape allegation. That's all they're going to remember. And you're toast the rest of the way. You're toast. You can't run for dog catcher up there again. So if he hangs in there and loses, but he fights, to a base that's not going to be big enough to win, I wouldn't be shocked, actually. I thought this morning he's out. He's done, because he's being eaten by his own. They're bailing ship faster than they jumped on.
Yeah.
But these are different times today, and I don't know.
That is true.
I don't know.
That is true.
I mean, the traditional equation is he's done. He's out, because when the national people and people in other states and your own state party says you need to get out, you get out. But this guy may not be that rational.
Right, and people said that about President Trump after the McCain comments, and then after the Access Hollywood tape, and he was able to be elected. Ken Paxton seems like he has a good shot at becoming a senator. So, I mean, I think Democrats, what I heard from a lot of Democrats in recent months was, you know, Republicans have had these kind of flawed candidates who speak to our concerns nonetheless. You know, why can't we have somebody like that too?
Right.
This guy's flawed, but he understands our situation. I mean, he could do that. That would be really interesting. But, you know, and he says stranger things have happened.
The thing I can't believe in Maine, because I've seen the online videos of just the Women for Graham up until yesterday, and he has a lot of female supporters that, despite all the allegations and the word of accusers, they didn't care. They kind of feel sorry for him. They've kind of adopted him. They kind of like him. And I'm talking like 50, 60-year-old voters who go to his events. Look at the video. There's 2-to-1 female. You look at Plattner's public events, and it's 2-to-1 women. But okay, all right, Dean, we're gonna run. Thank you.
Sounds good, Jack. Thanks.
Coming up, we're gonna have a great segment talking about the opioid settlement in the Granite State. Jim Buffetti, Attorney General's office. Hey, Google, hey, Alexa, play the Pulse of an H. Back